Good afternoon, everybody. This is Purple Update Live, which we're actually rebranding is About the Labor, which is a podcast that we've had for years that has a pretty strong following on Twitter. So we wanted to combine those forces and turn About the Labor into what it always was, which was a video show, a reaction show, and a audience line participation show. I wanted to roll out the new rebranding with someone who was on the first episode of Purple Update Live, a man who, especially if you were in the sports betting realm, perhaps needs no introduction as I am introducing him. That's Mr. Brandon Lang. How you doing, man?
I'm good, brother. What's up, man? Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
You know, on a little bit of a nice roll. Had a really good college bowl run. 6-2 my last day. Had just a great run. Iowa destroying USC. Louisiana Tech over Miami 14-0. Clemson beats Ohio State. Texas drills Utah. Oregon hung on there and got it done over Wisconsin. So nice to make my clients big time money in the bowls. But you know.
Did you pick the Gophers over Auburn?
You know, I liked them, and the whole world was on Auburn.
Yep.
It was one of the biggest money games at the Westgate here in town, where everybody bet Auburn. They had a few five-figure bets on Auburn money lines. So it was a really, really big win for the casino. PJ
Wow.
Throwing a boat, so Vegas made some serious money there. But at the end of the day, I thought Oregon was just a better team than Wisconsin. Sometimes in this business, you're on the wrong side of the game. I'm honest enough to admit that I probably was on the wrong side of the game. Wisconsin outplayed them, but Oregon hung in there and got the win. And when you're on a winning streak, you win games like that. But as I said, it's January. It's NFL playoffs. The Super Bowl is right around the corner.
Woo!
Everybody knows I'm 22-3-2 with the Super Bowl. I've hit 22 to 25 in my career, so it's a game that I pretty much own. So that's literally 3.5 weeks away, and now it's football weekend, NFL.
Yeah, and if people aren't familiar with you, if you could just do a quick introduction about who you are, like how you came up, what your website is, what makes you guys the leader in your industry, so on and so forth.
Yeah, I'm just a guy in LA that was doing porn for Vivid Video. No, I'm just kidding. I just
Living in the valley.
Living in the valley. I just, just came to Vegas, late 80s, validated my opinion with the right people. Would just go to the sports book every day. Just started, giving people my opinion, betting games, and kind of just built it up from there. And then the Pacino character heard about me, brought me to New York, and I went on a great 6-year run there from 89 to 95, and then just kind of got burned out, moved to LA, and thought that time frame with the Pacino character in New York would make a great movie.
Yeah.
And Network 2 for the money with Matthew McConaughey and Al Pacino. Matthew McConaughey plays me, and now I have an e-commerce website, BrandonLang.com, and like I said, it's about just churning out a winning, consistent product. I got myself on there with 9 other handicappers. We're on a really, really great tear right now. Not only myself, but Mitchell Newman and Steven D'Angelo, a couple of handicappers I brought to the site, and the site's doing really, really well. I think the site the last 3 days is on a 19-5 run with all the handicappers.
Okay.
I myself, as I said, I've won 8 of the last 11 days, looking for winning day number 9 of 12 today, and it's just everything's in a real good place right now. So feel good about the weekend. Got a couple best bets I like, and then, of course, in 2 weeks we got the national championship game. So life's good, as we say, life's good in Langland.
Awesome. And if people want to go to your website, they can create an account, correct, and get all of your insider takes for the most part.
Well, yeah, I make it pretty easy. If you go to BrandonLang.com, at the top of the webpage, it's got this 1-day free all-access pass. You don't have to do anything. You'll get all 10 handicappers absolutely free. I would wait till tomorrow and get the NFL best bets for tomorrow, and then you get every handicapper's best bet for that day, whether it's Saturday or Sunday. It's the least I can do. It's my way of saying thanks for coming to the website. Don't pay for anything. In a business where everybody wants something up front, I'm not like that. I'm not looking for your business just for one day.
Okay.
It's legal to wager. It's legal to wager on sports now. And if you're make a long-term investment, make it at BrandonLang.com, because I think my handicappers collectively are the best in the business.
Would you say, there's a lot of varying opinions on the strength of the NFC and which team is the class of the NFC? And now that we are down to, the final teams, the cream of the crop of the NFC, do you think that this year is specifically a little bit harder to discern which teams are, for example, going to go to the Super Bowl from the NFC, or like from your perspective versus across the gambling landscape? Do you see a lot of varied opinions on that, or is it pretty much standard to what you see year to year?
No, I think this year is an identical repeat of last year.
Okay.
And here's what I mean. Last year, arguably, the most entertaining game in the NFC last year was the Rams and the Saints in New Orleans, the regular season game. I think the final was the Saints 45-35. I think it was the Saints up 38-35 with the ball, about 2 minutes to go, 3rd and 8, and Brees hit Thomas over the corner for a touchdown. Final score 45-35. And then they had a spat. That corner was Sean Payton. We liked the matchup. That was that game. What did we get in the NFC Championship game? A repeat of that game. Now let's go over to the AFC. One of the more entertaining games this year was the Chiefs hosting the Ravens, and the Chiefs won that game 33-28. I think what we're going to get is we're going to get a rematch of that game and the AFC Championship game, much the way we did last year in the AFC, when one of the most entertaining games of the year was Kansas City at New England.
Yeah.
And a game that went back and forth, and New England figured out, and I think Kansas City won the game, or the game went right down the wire, high scoring, Patriots won by 3, and then in the AFC Championship, we got a rematch of those two, and the game was incredible. I think it plays out like that again. I just think that the cream of the crop in both leagues is KC and Baltimore and San Francisco and the Saints. We had that unbelievable 48-46 game.
Yeah.
And the Niners and the Saints. I think we get a rematch of that out in San Francisco, and I think we get a rematch of Baltimore, Kansas City, and Baltimore.
Yeah, I think when we talked last time, which was relatively early on into the season, you had pegged the Saints as the team to beat out of the NFC, but you obviously it's a week-to-week league. It's hard to make predictions that far out into the future in general, let alone when you're dealing with the amount of numbers that go into what you do. That having been said, I mean, do you see any chance for the Vikings to beat the Saints? I know they're not getting a lot of national support in that regard, and the fan base seems pretty split here locally.
No. For a couple reasons.
Perfect answer.
The loss on Monday night to the Packers, I know the Packers' defense is improving, but the Packers got exploited big time by a couple of teams that just devoured them.
Mm-hmm. The 49ers being one of them.
The Chargers devoured them.
Yeah.
The Niners devoured them. I could see if Minnesota was playing on the road in Green Bay on Monday night, you kind of laid an egg. They weren't. They had them at home. Granted, there was no Dalvin Cook. And sometimes when I came on your show last time and I ripped Zimmer,
yeah,
and I ripped Cousins, I don't think the two of them are a good match. But when you have no Dalvin Cook and you're Minnesota, sometimes you've got to go completely off grid. Why not come out in that game? Why not go 5 wide? Why not just start slinging it around? And why not take it to them? Instead, Minnesota played passively, and that passively ended up, now you're behind. The game got completely out of hand. The offensive line played perhaps one of their worst games of the year.
Yep.
And that's what scares me going into New Orleans. If you can't beat Green Bay on a Monday night at home, a divisional team that you're familiar with? What gives me the confidence to think that you're just going to go into New Orleans and you're going to find it? That was a game that you had to win on Monday night against Green Bay. It was a must-win situation.
Big time.
The only thing missing was Dalvin Cook, which is a big piece of the puzzle. But even with Cook being out, you still shouldn't have got dominated along the offensive line the way you did. I always tell people, when you handicap games, start in the trenches. And if you have a clear-cut advantage in the trenches, then you have yourself your winner. Both lines in the Green Bay game, D and offensive, had perhaps one of their worst showings of the year for the Vikings. And I just don't have the confidence of them going forward, especially playing a team like the Saints that should be the number one seed and have home field advantage all the way throughout. So perhaps it's a bad draw for Minnesota getting New Orleans right out of the box.
Yeah.
When New Orleans is probably your overall number one seed that just.
Yeah, I mean, and they were a play away from the easier route being Seattle than Green Bay. Something about that Green Bay game stuck with me, and it reminded me of what you had said last time you were on the show, which was that Zimmer plays not to lose as opposed to playing to win. And there's a quote from that game that ended up being the catalyst for me writing nearly a 5,000-word article about basically getting rid of Zimmer this offseason, especially if the Vikings are one and done on Sunday. And the crux of it was that, this offense has played really well. Cousins has played, statistically at least, on a level. At one point, he was matching Mahomes' numbers almost identically from 2018. The problem I have is when they deviate from what Cousins is good at, which is play action, rollout, bootlegs, so on and so forth. And after the Green Bay game, Zimmer essentially said, when asked why they didn't run any of those plays, again, whenever it's a big game, they deviate from that. And he said, well, they did a good job of containing us and not allowing us to do that. It's not as if they tried and failed because the defense overpowered them. They just all of a sudden decided we can't do that against this defense for whatever reason. Now, he backpedaled from those comments a few days later and almost made it worse by saying, yeah, we should have got him out of the pocket more. We can't have him standing around so much. But it's that sort of disconnect from the game plan, kind of not really knowing what they're doing, but saying, yeah, we didn't do it because, Green Bay contained it. At some point, you're going to have to do what you do well better than the other team is good at stopping what you do well. And every time they go against a team that can do that, they default to this stuff that they know Cousins is bad at. You don't want Cousins in the pocket standing there for 3 or 4 seconds. He gets happy feet. He panics. It's just, it's dumbfounding to me that they keep doing that, and that's really one of the bigger reasons why I have no faith in Sunday. I really think if they were to play the way that they did offensively against any of the teams from week 5 to let's say week, 11 or 12, outside of the Chiefs game in the first half of the Broncos game, they can hang with anybody. I mean, that Seattle game, the Monday Night Football one, they had the worst quarter of football I've ever seen. They imploded, and they still were within 4 points at the end of that game. They didn't win it, obviously, but it shows that they're capable of hanging with anybody, but it's a lot of self-inflicted stuff, I think, that is going to hamstring this team. And so I think it is important to highlight what you said about Zimmer's philosophy as a coach. I think that extends to Stefanski and some of the play calling on offense. And it's just really disappointing at this point. And I feel like it's the legacy that he's going to leave. And so that leads the question, whether or not they should stick with him next season and expect different results from the same thing. I think I know the answer that you're going to give. But it might just be bad timing with all the coaching openings that are coming. I don't know. I don't know what your thoughts are generally on the coaching staff or the Stefanski as a head coach prospect or any of that.
Well, I think they're going to keep him. Look at Jacksonville Marone.
Yeah.
There's no way they should keep him. The owner down there is an idiot. We're going to stay with him. I don't know what leads you to believe that man's going to turn around that franchise. It's a war of attrition. All they basically do is recycle these coaches back through.
Yeah, they really do.
I mean, seriously, Ron Rivera gets fired. He gets a job in Washington. McCarthy set out, basically being able to handpick his job. Dallas wants to go with somebody proven. Who's going to deal with Jerry Jones? Cleveland wants to go with somebody proven. They're all going to recycle, and I'm sure, wouldn't stride Marvin Lewis leave Arizona State with Herm Edwards and gets another job, or Hugh Jackson. It's all just one big recycled mess. So, in my opinion, Minnesota's never going to get over that hump and get where they need to go simply because their head coach is too conservative, and that doesn't bode well. Zimmer just isn't that guy. He's too consistent. I go back to the Washington game, and that's when Minnesota was doomed. That's when Minnesota wasn't going to go anywhere. That's when you knew that team was not going to do anything this year. When you play an entire football game at home in front of your crowd, and you don't punt in the game, and you only score 19 points.
Yeah,
there's something severely wrong with that. There's so much wrong with that on the planet Earth that you play 60 minutes of NFL football, your punter never gets off the bench, and you struggled to score 19 points. There's a huge disconnect in that franchise from head coach to coordinator to quarterback, and I said they were doomed then, and I think they're doomed now. If Cook's able to run a little bit, they'll stay with the Saints for a while. But if Aaron Rodgers was able to pick them off, if Jones was able to run the way they ran against them, it's going to be a long day with Kamara and the boys on Sunday.
Yeah, and it's looking like Mackenzie Alexander and Mike Hughes are both not playing, so they're going to be thin at the cornerback position, which is a nightmare going up against Michael Thomas, who, would you say he's the best receiver in the NFL?
Yes, hands down.
And the Vikings could have drafted him as opposed to Laquan Treadwell, as some people, namely me, were begging them to do at the time, which is a little frustrating. I mean, there would have been it would have been a pretty crowded receiver group, but the Saints wouldn't have had him then either.
Don't even get me started on that. Chicago Bears took Mitchell Trubisky instead of Patrick Mahomes,
and they traded up for him.
And you traded up for him. I mean, you can go on and on and on. You got the ex-GM of the Bears giving Rex Grossman $140 million, or giving Jay Cutler $140 million.
Yeah, 2 first-round draft picks too, right?
I've said this for years. The people that are running these NFL teams are nothing more than glorified gym teachers whose buddies gave them a job out of college, fetching them coffee. And as they moved up in the coaching ranks, they brought them along. And you handed the job because you've been in that organization for X amount of years. It's one big boys club. And once you penetrate that circle, you're in that circle. But to be honest with you, there are some GMs that know what they're doing, but for the most part, they're just as clueless as everybody else.
Yeah.
You see it time and time and time again, and it's almost laughable with some of the things that we see happen day in and day out in the NFL.
And I should give credit where credit's due. I think Zimmer has helped Spielman identify talent that works in his system. I think he's done a good job of fostering that talent and getting a lot of high percentage turnouts on his top picks on the defense. And that's almost what makes it more frustrating, that he's had the keys to this team. They've given him every draft pick he's wanted, every dollar. He's had carte blanche. And this is the result. I don't know. A lot of people say expectations are subjective and they vary from person to person. So I tend to go with the expectation of the franchise, which has a new stadium, world-class headquarters out in Eagan, Minnesota. They have very high expectations. And again, I don't want to just keep repeating myself on this point, but I don't think where this team is at is good enough. And I put that squarely on the head coach's shoulders. Speaking of which, so I mean, how do you feel?
Listen, let me just say this.
Okay.
Let me just say this. That, and Minnesota fans may be upset when I said this. You had your quarterback of the future.
Uh-oh.
And you let him go for Case Keenum. And you're stuck with Kirk Cousins. If you just stay patient and keep Teddy Bridgewater, it's a whole different ballgame. And that's all I had to say on that.
Yeah, and I've been a Cousins supporter. I mean, I think, and I've said this all along from before they got him, in the right system, he can put up elite numbers with the guys around him. I understand that what he's bad at, he's terrible at, and that's a really wide valley between what he's good at and what he's bad at. But it really, I mean, I don't know what how you feel about the odds of Brady actually leaving New England this offseason. But if the Cousins contract is the impetus for this team missing out on Brady, that will break my brain. Because I really think that if anyone could actually exercise the demons this team has and bring them to the promised land, regardless of age, regardless of his decline at the end of the season, I think Brady could be that guy.
I think you got a better chance of seeing God show up at your house right now with Jessica Drake of Vivid Video and Jenna Jameson in her prime than Tom Brady playing with anybody else next year. Tom Brady's done.
Okay.
The Patriots are done. And before I get off this podcast, I will give you listeners this nugget. Do not be the least bit surprised to see the Tennessee Titans go in there and beat New England outright.
Wow.
Because New England has been overrated all year long. And this is a situation where I like Tennessee plus the points here. If you can't beat the Miami Dolphins at home last week when you needed that win to get a bye, you've never gone to the Super Bowl without a bye. Belichick knew how important that game was, and you couldn't beat the Miami Dolphins, and now you're taking on a Tennessee team that since they named Ryan Tannehill their quarterback, they're 7-3, and they're the number 2 scoring team in the NFL. Good luck. Give me the Titans plus the points, and don't be surprised to see them win outright.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, for a while there, everyone was saying that the Patriots might go undefeated this season. It's interesting how quickly things fell apart. How do you feel about the Packers?
Packers are overrated, and they got no shot whatsoever. They might win next week, but then if they place the Saints next week, which they probably will, they got no shot. None. If Minnesota upsets the Saints, then I think Minnesota goes to San Francisco and they get the winner of Philly and Seattle, and that's a nice matchup for Green Bay. So I don't know. I'm not a believer in Green Bay, though. I'm not. I think their defense is suspect. And like I said at the top of this podcast, I believe we're destined for a San Francisco Saints rematch.
Yeah, me too. Unfortunately, again, I in typical Vikings fashion, I'm sure they'll, assuming they've learned their lesson and they come out and they do what they're good at. They have Dalvin Cook back. Adam Thielen will most likely have less attention than Diggs will have with Lattimore. Who knows? But I could see it being like a 41-38 sort of situation. Last second field goal, heartbreaker for the Vikings. But at the same time, I've just thought the Packers have been fraudulent all season. Aaron Rodgers just doesn't seem like Aaron Rodgers anymore, statistically or otherwise. I mean, that Monday Night Football game, he was missing throws in all sorts of ways, behind the guys, over the top of them, miscommunications. I mean, they handed that game to the Vikings. There was 3 first half turnovers. There was almost 4. It should have been 4. And so I don't think either the Packers or the Vikings really have a shot, and that depresses me on levels that I can't even explain. But again, if you could reiterate your website and kind of what your philosophy is for new people. Like you said, you're not looking for the onesie twosie deals. You're looking for to build a relationship that lasts a lifetime.
Absolutely. It's BrandonLane.com. Each handicapper has one best bet a day. Sometimes we're on the same side of the game, sometimes we're not, but overall the product is the best it's ever been. And like I said, one day free all access pass, top of the webpage, like free day on me. My way of saying, come meet my handicappers and see if you like what you read. So, other than that, Happy New Year. I got to scoop my next radio show.
Yeah.
Good luck to your Vikings on over the weekend, and let's talk soon.
Awesome, man. Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye.
All right. Again, that was Brandon Lang of BrandonLang.com. If you're not familiar with him, there is a movie starring Matthew McConaughey and Al Pacino from, I think, 2005 or 2006 called Two for the Money, about his life. And he's always very honest. I mean, obviously, he has no allegiance to the Vikings. But I think there is value in finding alternative opinions on the team, getting outside of this purple bubble that we're in and seeing what people think. And I think getting the opinion of someone who does it for a living financially through the betting world is even more important, because those guys don't have those sentimental attachments. They're specifically or solely looking for the money angle. And that really removes anything outside of, okay, let's look at the statistics, the history, the patterns, and see what we have. Um, and so I don't want to really be negative about the team going into the weekend. I do genuinely think that they can beat the Saints. I wrote about that yesterday on VikingsTerritory.com, that if they play their game, they can beat the Saints. They're just going to have to keep up with them on offense. Although I could see them defensively playing really well in the first half. I fear Sean Payton's halftime adjustments, a la the 2017 game, where I think they were shut out in the first half, and then they came out. Yeah, it was 17-0 in the first half of that game. Then they came out, scored a bunch. The rest is history. And so, I mean, either way, we're going to need this offense humming along, and there are things to point at, to get excited about. I mean, Thielen hasn't had 4 catches since week 6. He should be fully healthy. He should be also underrated, perhaps. I mean, I can't imagine that they would, single cover him all the time. But I think the focus will be on Diggs, and what we've seen as fans and people who cover the Vikings, that, to start last season, Cousins and Thielen were on fire together because a lot of the attention was on Diggs. He was getting double covered. A lot of teams didn't want to get beat deep, so they decided, well, we'll just take the chunk yardage that Thielen will get over a, down the field strike. Whether that's right or wrong is another question. But I think that, combined with the fact that Dalvin should be healthy, maybe Riley Reif will be healthy. He's been banged up. It should give us some optimism, assuming they play their game. Again, it's really going to come down to that. Now, people in the chat, I was scrambling this morning to get ready for Brandon coming on, are saying that Mackenzie Alexander and Mike Hughes are going to be out of the game. That's not good. But, as I've said for weeks and weeks, this season is going to come down to Xavier Rhodes. And sadly, I mean, if you guys recall how he matched up against Michael Thomas, and really had a chip on his shoulder about it. I mean, that touchdown, he was very angry. I think he was angry before it because of the penalty, and then they went right back at him. But that was Rhodes at his peak, even though he didn't necessarily win that matchup. So that should scare you a little bit. I would not be surprised if they put Trey on him more. But like I said, I mean, this is neither here nor there, but can you imagine had they taken the advice of me and taken Thomas instead of Treadwell? I mean, Thomas was a second-round pick. Obviously, Treadwell was a first-round pick. I wrote articles about it at the time. I've talked about this a lot. I mean, I started out the chat that day for that draft. First comment was anyone but Treadwell. I really wanted Michael Thomas, and then for them to use their last pick or an undrafted free agent pick up on Bowringer. And I get a lot of shit from Joe about that on Morning Joe's. But if you look on mockdraftables.com and you type in Moritz Bowringer, nobody in the history of that website, they have their stats, at least the last time I checked, only go back to 1999. So you don't see Randy Moss's stats, but I can't imagine his would be any better around the board. Basically, they make like a web, and each tentacle is where the receiver stacks up percentage-wise against other receivers in that draft. So it'll say like 4.240 is in the 99th percentile. 45-inch vertical is in the 100th percentile. So on and so forth. That was actually the impetus for me not wanting Treadwell, because he was a guy that was supposedly good at contested catches. When you think about contested catches and jump balls, you think a guy should have good upper body strength, and good vertical jumping ability. He had neither of those. He was in the bottom 20th percentile for both of them, which to me made me think that he didn't spend a whole lot of time in the weight room in college. That's something that I think happens in the SEC more than the Big Ten. A lot of guys get by just on pure talent and not as much of a work ethic. Obviously, these guys are working out, but without the academic standards that the Big Ten has, they're not necessarily pushing themselves further, and I think that translates to the NFL for a multitude of reasons. But if you looked at bull ringers, his were just nuts. I mean, everything was 95 or above, and the only person that came close to that was Megatron. But if you took an average of all of his percentages, Mobo was actually like 1.5 percentage points higher than Megatron. I don't know why I'm talking about Mobo right now, but I still love him. And I actually we're friends on Twitter, so that's kind of fun. Rocky just asked if we're concerned with the secondary. I'm always concerned with the secondary. I mean, like I said, it's going to come down to Xavier Rhodes, and I hope. I mean, I feel like he's played better. The secondary's played better, but that's because they've been rotating. And if Hughes is out, that scares me. I will say that I trust Curse in the nickel more than Mackenzie Alexander. I wouldn't have said that a few weeks ago, but he had a really bad end to his season. He's had some dubious plays during the season, but he really had a rough game a couple weeks ago. And so I think Curse is bigger. I think he's more consistent. I think that might be a silver lining, but I really, really, really wanted to spate Rhodes with Hughes. Now, you could argue that Chris Boyd had a good game against the Bears, and maybe that could be a silver lining there, that he'll be the rotation guy. I do not know where Holton Hill has been this entire time. I don't know what's going on there, but assuming Hughes is out, then you're going to see more Boyd, more Holton Hill. Hill's got the size and the length. I think Boyd is better, or might be better. He just doesn't have the size. So we'll see. But if that's the case, I mean, you're going to see a lot of Trey Waynes on Michael Thomas. If he lines up in the slot, he'll go up against Curse. That might end up working out really well. His size and physicality it could really throw Thomas off of his game. But we'll see. I mean, I know that things aren't as simple as perhaps I explain them. I know that a lot of the time, if you're going to run screens, you want to do that against the zone as opposed to a man defense. But there's ways to get around that. You can run more bootleg actual runs for Cousins. Get him out of the pocket. Get him attempting to pick up first downs. That'll force them to switch their defense, perhaps go more into a zone. Then you take advantage of that by running a screen. I think to shut the crowd up, you're going to need to establish a ground game and a nickel and diming game. And I don't mean it in any other way outside of look at how this offense performed against Dallas. They did a lot of misdirection screens, a lot of delayed screens, a lot of play action screens. And I think they're going to need to do that more. You really just want to have, perfect world. You come out, you get the ball first, and you take like 9 minutes to go down the field methodically, and you score a touchdown. That would go a long way in quieting the crowd. And there's absolutely no reason why that shouldn't work. We have all hands on deck for the most part. This offense is extremely talented. Everyone nationally is talking about, well, how do you stop Breeze? And then you got Kamara and it's Michael Thomas and Jared Cook. I would argue the Vikings have an equal or better position by position outside of the offensive line, skill positions, offense. They have two really good receivers that are in the same league as Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas is just vaunted because he has, and I'm not taking anything away from what he's doing, but he's getting a tremendous amount of targets because he catches them, but he's just getting target after target after target. I mean, if you did the same thing to Thielen which we've arguably done in spurts, not this consistently, I think you'd see the same thing. I mean, Thielen is built for nearly 150 catches, 120 catches. He easily could do that. I'm not, again, taking anything away from him. He's a tremendous route runner. He's really good at what he does. But the Vikings have the same thing times two. So I get why people are down on them. I get that Monday Night Football game sucked a lot of the air out of the room. But again, if they play their game, they can really hang with them. We saw that against Seattle. Yeah, it's they have a shot here, and it's not as peachy as guys on KFan are saying. I mean, I think I heard Paul Allen this morning say, don't get me wrong, the Saints, they have a shot. They might win this game too. I mean, they could. I mean, it's almost like an afterthought, and I get that they represent the team and that's their job. And I'm not bashing PA. I love PA, but there's a lot of question marks here, and it's very, very nerve-wracking, to say the least. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I am totally not ready for the offseason. I felt like the season flew by. And so, yeah, this game is going to be incredibly important. Yeah, and that's really where it's at. Tang, I was wondering where you at. Uh, oh, well, if Madison doesn't play, which is a strong possibility, that concerns me, obviously, for reasons that Tang just asked. He basically said thoughts on him being out, and if Cook gets re-injured, is the game over for the Vikings? Not necessarily in terms of players or the roster, but it might be in terms of the coaches. What I mean by that is, let's theoretically say, knock on this really stylish wood paneling. Let's say Cook gets hurt on the first play of the game. That, to me, might signal to Zimmer and Stefanski, okay, we can't run any play action plays now, a la Monday Night Football. And so that could really affect their game plan and or their confidence in that game plan, and that would be a complete nightmare. I mean, like I've said before, I really believe that we're going to know a lot about how this game's going to end in the first drive, first couple plays. If they come out and you see Cousins throwing the ball into the feet of guys really for almost strangely fast like he did, I mean, that just should show you that I think the reason he did that was because he knew those plays were broken. And B, that's just going to signal more of the same. I mean, if we're going to look for any positives, this Vikings team has played the Saints a few times. Actually, they played them obviously in 2017. They played them last year. They lost to them, but both Diggs and Thielen had over 100 yards receiving. And so that's a positive. Eli Apple might be out. And so, again, if they get Cousins out of the pocket, which they should, I can't imagine they wouldn't. I mean, I can, obviously, but I'm really... They have a shot in this game. It's going to come down to whether or not they're confident enough in their offense playing its game and not letting the defense of the Saints dictate things. If they're running man-to-man, there's ways to get them to lean towards zone to do what you want to do. I think it's going to be, from the game plan perspective, and getting back to your question, Tang, I think it's going to take a lot of screens and short passes to the running back for them to really slow the game down. That's going to be really important. Just slowing the game down. It might be like Dallas kind of felt like a shootout, but like a low-end shootout, like a 20, not even a 30-point scoring shootout. You're going to want a shootout like that. Long drives, but those drives end in touchdowns. Now, if there's any sort of silver line to the way the defense has been playing, is they are really bend, don't breaky. At points they were break and break. or bend and break. My brain just broke, ironically. But the Vikings have the second best red zone defense in the NFL, and that typically means when the playoffs comes around, they're gonna probably get a touchdown scored every time the Saints get into the red zone, because we saw against the Eagles in 2017, the Vikings were tremendous against third down, historically good, and that didn't end up panning out for them. I'm being facetious a little bit. I don't want to be too negative. I know Brandon didn't have a lot of faith in this team, but I mean, I just don't fear the Saints as much as everyone else does. I think there's familiarity there. I think that the Vikings are Zimmer, if he has one talent, is really good at taking advantage of any negative press the Vikings are getting and getting them really psyched up as this underdog. The Vikings not being included in that NFL playoff preview was part of it. You had the comments from that Saints player, I forget who, but he was on Rich Eisen's show, and he basically bashed Cousins, saying, well, we don't know which Cousins we're going to see. At times, he looks like a competent quarterback, end quote. That's something that I think will rile Cousins up tremendously. And ironically, when Cousins is pissed, he plays at his best. You would think, as a guy who gets happy feet in the pocket, that he might not be the best at that additional pressure, because it seems like he succumbs to pressure. But I could really see him coming out on fire tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, because of that. People are asking, what are the Vikings going to do with two corners out? I mean, they have cornerback depth. Those cornerbacks also play two different positions. One's in the nickel, one's an outside corner. And so you're still going to see Rhodes and Waynes starting. The difference is going to be that Curse, if Mackenzie Alexander is hurt on that level, Curse will just end up playing a lot in the nickel. And I think, again, that's a benefit to this team, because Mackenzie Alexander has been exploited a few times this season, and he's had his worst game a couple games ago. He played horrible. And so what that does, though, is it limits the rotation that they've been doing with Rhodes, because they've had Rhodes out there, but then they've also been spading him with Hughes and with guys like Boyd, or who am I thinking of? Holton Hill, not really, but Holton Hill could be in the rotation, but he hasn't been. So I think we'll see more Holton Hill. I think we'll see more Chris Boyd. I don't think it's the end of the world. I mean, the starters are there. Rhodes is going to play. Maybe he got healthy during this mini bye. It definitely hurts, but it doesn't hurt that much. I actually think that I would actually rather see Boyd than Hughes, and that's because I feel like Hughes does make flashy plays that stick out to people, especially people who don't like Rhodes, but he gets beat a lot. And it's almost like a 3 bad play to 1 really good play ratio. It's just that those good plays are good. He lights people up, or he almost has an interception, or he does have an interception. And so we'll just see more Chris Boyd, in more Xavier Rhodes than I think we otherwise would have. But it's not the end of the world. Oh yeah, Rocky says it was Jordan, the lineman, that took a shot at Cousins. Yeah, that you like that comment from Cousins came from a lot of animosity in the Washington press about how he was playing and other things, and I think Cousins has that edge to him, and so the more mad you make him, the better he's going to play. It's like that movie I, Tanya, about Tanya Harding and how her mom would pay people to piss her off before competitions because she skated better mad. Cousins seems like such a buttoned-up professional guy, but man, yeah, he can really get fired up on the field, and I love that about him. I will leave with this, and this is just kind of a fun little aside, but I was listening to K-Fan, and they had Florio on, and I don't like bashing other people who do what I do, just on a way higher and obviously more prestigious level. But he's just got strange takes, and they were talking about Brady, and he's like, well, maybe he'll go to the Chargers or like maybe he'll go to the Niners if Garoppolo lays an egg in the playoffs. It's like there's no reality in which they would bring in Tom Brady in San Francisco, even if he threw 5 interceptions. Why would they do that? So then what, you bench Garoppolo for a season or two? That wouldn't work. That would be a nightmare. That having been said, if Brady was actually looking, and he's like, well, maybe he'll go to the Saints. No, the Saints would put him in Bridgewater. Eh. But man, wouldn't it be something if somehow the Vikings ended up with Brady? I mean, again, I've been a big Cousins guy the entire time, but I do know that with Brady, this team would win the Super Bowl, and so I don't know what you guys feel about that, but wouldn't that be something? Oh man. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Again, we are rebranding this show to be called About the Labor, which is a podcast that we've had for a long time. The host of that left, and I've kept the show. We've tried a few different formats, a few different hosts, and I really wanted to be consistent for the fan base. And there's an About the Labor Twitter, which is called Vikings ATL Pod. I'll put that in the article with this show. We'll be going hopefully every day, assuming the Vikings win. If they don't, we'll limit it to maybe 3 days a week. It's an open format. Talk about news of the day and chat with you guys. Answer questions. Bring on some special guests, so on and so forth. I've been talking to Nick Swartzen lately. I'm hoping to get him on the show. Assuming again the Vikes win. So we'll see. But thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'll be back tomorrow and on game day. And let's hope that the Vikings can pull out a win. If not, maybe it's Tom Brady time, right? Clickbait. Man, that's the most clickbaity thing I've ever said. Skull.